The thing that really interests me is enlightenment, which to me is a scientific fact. A person could be totally an atheist and be interested in becoming enlightened because that's a permanent change in how your brain works. If you want to be in heaven, go within and create a place where you cannot be shaken. That is enlightenment.
What I enjoyed about your book was realizing that enlightenment isn't just reserved for like Buddha or Jesus, that anyone can achieve enlightenment. Welcome to the Inner Calling podcast, where we honor the light inside you that's always guiding you home. I'm so excited to introduce you to today's guest, Dr. Elaine Aron, an internationally best-selling clinical psychologist who's best known for her groundbreaking work on high sensitivity. In her newest book, she turns her attention to another fascinating topic and passion of mine, which is spirituality. Today we're discussing spirituality through a highly sensitive lens, an objective, practical, evidence-informed guide to understanding spirituality. Thank you so much for being here with us, Dr. Aron.
It's my pleasure. It's wonderful to talk to someone with shared interests, I guess. It's a tricky topic. I wanted to have the title of my book be Spirituality or Whatever.
I actually love that title.
Everyone who hears it loves that title, but the publisher had to have highly sensitive in it to attract, even though it's not about highly sensitive people. Some people are turned off by the very idea of spirituality. I don't see a conflict between it and science at all, but I do know that many people do, and that some people are really upset by it, that it's the opposite of truth or factuality, whereas I don't feel it is at all. Most people, if they've gone to college, get a lot of that feeling that it's anti-science and that you just leave spirituality, and spirituality is often equated with religion, which of course is not correct. And so people don't grow in that area. I think it was one of the sad things. It's an area where people are left with what they learned at home, if they learned anything at home.
How did you become interested in spirituality yourself?
Well, I'm not sure that I'm interested in spirituality exactly. I sort of turned the interview upside down by saying that the thing that really interests me is enlightenment.
Oh, interesting.
Which to me is a scientific fact. I think a person could be totally an atheist, agnostic, anti-spiritual, and be interested in becoming enlightened because that's a permanent change in how your brain works. To my mind, the brain is part of a deeper field of consciousness, which is kind of like the quantum field. I think it is a way of bringing spirituality and science together in another way.
Could you break down what exactly is enlightenment, and how do you know if you've been experiencing it?
Well, first of all, it is permanent. Enlightenment is a change in the brain that has to do with the brain becoming more coherent and calm. It's able to maintain two things at once: the normal activity of daily life and something broader underneath. And it's that something broader underneath that never changes. It's there 24/7. It's there with you the rest of your life. Now, that breaks down enlightenment. The problem, of course, is how do you get there? And that's a whole other subject. But I think that people can't even seek it if they don't know that it's not only exists, but is accessible.
What I enjoyed about your book was realizing that enlightenment isn't just reserved for like Buddha or Jesus, that anyone can achieve enlightenment. That was really interesting to read about because I hadn't thought about enlightenment that way.
Yes, of course, it's where you set the bar. If it's going to be Buddha or Jesus, my computer is resting on a book, the title of which is Halfway Up the Mountain, in which many Buddhists sort of say basically people who are claiming they're enlightened are wrong because they haven't got there yet. And that depends on how you define it. I talk in the book about something that I think happened in the 60s, which was a kind of a revolution when these teachers from the East came to the West. They brought meditation, but they always had in mind that the purpose of meditation was enlightenment, nirvana, liberation. And they had clear ideas about what that was and how to get there. That was the only purpose of Buddha's life, was to have people reach nirvana. And he tried very hard for over 40 years to do that in his teaching. And I think most Buddhists would have to say only partially successful. He knew how he got there, but it's so difficult sometimes to get other people to the same place. Now we're in a wild west where some people have been meditating since the 60s, and some of them have become enlightened. But that's where we are now, is needing to know more about what is the best path. Is it a matter of individuality, or is it that we could get it more refined as we watch people get there and then we hear from them how they did it? So we have hundreds of books now and podcasts out there about people who are enlightened, describing how they got there. You don't want to get in there and assume they're right, but it is worth noting how they did it.
Interesting point. It's not about spirituality, it's about enlightenment.
But of course, a lot of the book is about meditation. What I wanted to do was give people a sense of the different ways that meditation are viewed as paths to enlightenment. And that gives people, if they hear about a method, they can categorize it. They can say, oh, they're asking me to focus my attention, concentration method, or they're asking me to just monitor my breathing, monitor my thoughts. So focused attention is one way of getting towards this unboundedness, because eventually you kind of break through like a Zen koan. You concentrate so hard, your brain just kind of goes poof, can't stand it anymore. Satori, the method of just open monitoring of mindfulness. Oh, that's a way of getting your mind to just be aware of the background, and then you might drop into that unboundedness that way. Although Buddha taught mindfulness meditation, open monitoring of the breathing or of the thoughts, but he did not see that as the path to enlightenment. That was only a beginning. And then there's what we call automatic self-transcending, which is trying to go directly to that unbounded awareness in your brain and in the universe, and then come back from it and go about your business. I'm not sure any of the methods of meditation without some focused practice doesn't usually get people enlightened, even though that's the goal. And that's because for most of us, life is too stressful. It's like you take a bath and you get clean, but then you go out and get dirty again. It's hard to make progress with meditation by itself, but it's essential because it gives you at least a glimpse of the goal.
Research, did you find that meditation was the primary method towards enlightenment? Or
yes, I'd say definitely, but often it needs a booster. Buddha was doing this, is what is called telling people about, like I'm right now telling people, there is this experience you could have. And if you do it in the right way, and many people have tried on their Rupert Spira, Lucille Lorne on .net, Adyashanti has tried this method. Even Deepak Chopra has tried this method of describing it. And sometimes it's just like you're ready. But the readiness comes from the meditation. So all of the famous teachers like Ramana Maharishi in India, who he's pointing out, still had people meditate because he knew that was the ground on which the fertile seed had to grow. But if it's just ground with no fertile seed, it doesn't always grow. A few people, like Buddha, set out of the forest to get enlightened. They had this idea that it was possible. They starved themselves. They tortured themselves. And Buddha decided that was not the way. But people were trying so hard. It's kind of like outer space. We know it's there. We've sent a few people out into outer space. But how do we all get there? We know human beings are the species is in a very strange place. And what is it going to do with what it's accomplished? Is it going to fizzle, or is it going to move past the overuse of its resources and into something else? So we're all part of the experiment. Let's dig in and be part of the experiment. You can. It's accessible. People are getting enlightened, and you can also look into it, figure out what sounds like it will work for you.
Have you experienced enlightenment? I think there's so many of our listeners out there who may not really know why it's so important.
Yes, I was very determined, and it took a 6-month trip when my Jungian analysis of 20 years ended, and I've been meditating all that time. I went off on what I called the pilgrimage to nowhere, which is from a Taoist story about somebody keeps asking you, where is Tao that you end up having to say it's in the palace of nowhere. So we went off, and every month we would meditate, do a meditation retreat of at least a week. And that was to give us that fertile ground. And then I popped into what I just call a shift that happened in the end of 2016. I was walking on a path in Hawaii when it happened, and I knew, oh, this unboundedness, this feeling, it's never going away. It's been here for a while now, and it's never going away. So I had that awakening. And what one feels in this shift is that one is apart from things in a certain way, not in a bad, dissociated way, but more in a watching with equanimity sort of way. So when you hear about something that might upset you, there's some kind of weird way in which there's this quiet equanimity along with, okay, that doesn't sound good, being told that I had breast cancer. And it was like, oh, that's not a good thing. And yet there was this calm that sort of shocked me. And I just went through the treatment very matter-of-factly. It was caught very early. But of course, I could get another cancer because the older you get, the more likely you are to get some kind of cancer. When things I don't like happen in the world, people around me get upset. I know that they think I'm a little strange, but at a deeper level, I don't feel like I can be shaken. And geez, and when you think of all the turmoil we all experience, you as a therapist, you know how much turmoil people go through. And to have a part of us that's unshakable, of course, we try to build that into clients, but it's just very difficult. So it would be a real plus if we could sort of shake a magic wand and enlighten everyone. We can't quite do that, but at least we know the state exists. And it's funny because I talk in the book about the importance of waking up and cleaning up, and we can talk about that. But therapy is a lot about cleaning up, and then waking up is about getting enlightened. Well, we don't talk about it as therapists. You know, it's like almost forbidden to go much into the topic of spirituality because you might be tramping on somebody's toes if they have certain beliefs.
Very taboo.
Very taboo.
Yeah.
I've joked that it's more comfortable to talk about your sex life at an intimate party than to talk about your spirituality because it triggers people because they haven't worked, they haven't thought it through. And some people have very fixed ideas due to religious teachings that then make the subject tricky.
Yes, people mix up spirituality with religion. How do you define the difference between spirituality and religion?
Oh, religion is clearly a human-created set of ideas and concepts that's aiming to help people reach something in the spiritual area, either in this life or the afterlife. But it's very specific to those who have that teaching. And it's a source of conflict, sadly. But I think its root is in the desire for something deeper, a path to find it. We look to Jesus, to Muhammad, to the prophets. They are supposedly have given us the knowledge, and then we don't want to deviate from that because that would be spoiling that knowledge. That means that things get pretty rigid. And when one religion comes up against another, they bristle. And of course, there have been people who've all along said all the different religions are just expressions of something deeper. And I think that's correct. That's all religions are an expression of an attempt to get closer to God or to get closer to the unbounded.
Now, how would you define spirituality?
I feel that it's, for most people, it's what gives life meaning. So if one doesn't have something that's spiritual going on, they don't have anything to anchor them in everything that goes on in life. So I like the poet William Stafford. There's a thread that runs through it. It's invisible, but you hold on to that thread, and no matter how much change there is, you have that, and it feels unshakable. Look at the Holocaust. That kind of shook a lot of people's spiritual beliefs, didn't it? And we continue to wonder, how bad things can happen to good people, and we have to have a spirituality that is big enough to answer those questions. I really feel that enlightenment is the answer. I think it more than anything else is some kind of inner peace. which comes from a larger perspective. If you want to be in heaven, go within and create a place where you cannot be shaken. And that is enlightenment. That's the only real spirituality, the unshakable spirituality. It's not perfection because we still have our bodies and minds and our past experiences. We can get shaken by something. We still can have complexes, but they're much softened and we can deal with them much better. A person who's really looked at all their complexes and knows how to handle them, but that person still might be shaken by an entirely new thing, like a terminal illness or the loss of someone very dear. And how do we understand that? I've thought a lot about the issue of human attachment, which Buddha thought a lot about. And of course, he recommended people not get married just because as soon as you're married, you're attached. You're attached to children. We're going to still have our instincts as long as we're in human bodies. And the most profound instinct probably is reproduction. It's to mate and to have children and to care for those children. So what happens to instincts like that when you're enlightened? I have a son, and I'm deeply in love with my son who is in his 50s. He comes to visit with his sons. So in spite of my shift and my equanimity and all the rest, I have issues from my childhood around separation and insecure attachment. Those are very deep issues. It took me 20 years of analysis to straighten that out. And yet, did I straighten it out? Not entirely, because when he leaves, I am in pain for 24 hours. And I know it will last 24 hours, and I just distract myself. And the idea that there's an inner peace in which pain passes is certainly better than no inner peace at all.
What I like about your book is that it makes it very accessible to achieve enlightenment. If enlightenment is simply accessing the part inside you that is unshakable, that each of us can access that.
Yes, and that's kind of the theme of your
It is that everyone has an inner light inside them. And,
right. So of course we're soulmates here.
I know. You get it. As an inner light, and it's very important to access this inner light. That's the purpose of our entire lives. And I really love how you break down the different forms of meditation, because I've always been very confused about all the different lineages of meditation and all the different forms of meditation. And
amen, girl.
It's very confusing. And your write-up was actually the clearest explanation of meditation that I've seen.
Good. I think understanding mindfulness meditation important because it's the one that we tend to encounter today.
Can you explain the difference between mindfulness and meditation for our listeners?
Well, mindfulness is a form of meditation, but it's the kind that is this open monitoring of just attending to your breathing, or the Dalai Lama teaches it as just watching your thoughts. And as a therapist, that's an accomplishment. A person can settle down and just watch their thoughts and not be shaken up by them. And if you're shaken up by them, then you watch yourself be shaken up. Watching or monitoring is a profound ability. And that's why Buddha saw it as absolutely the first step towards nirvana, was just being able to do that. Thich Nhat Hanh made a big deal, of course, out of mindfulness meditation and being mindful all the time. Now, that problem with being mindful all the time is that it requires us to divide our mind, which is impossible. You're trying to get something done, and you also have to be aware of doing it. That doesn't work. So it has its limits, but it's a very good path. The limit, I heard an interview of Jon Kabat-Zinn. I heard someone ask him about enlightenment. It was the only time I heard him really in a complex. He got angry. He said we should not talk to people about enlightenment. It just confuses them and it makes them set a goal for themselves that's impossible. Well, I don't agree.
That's true. That's a lot of times people don't talk about enlightenment itself.
They really avoid it. I know Dan Brown, who taught the Tibetan form of meditation, there's an interview where he says, people constantly asking me about meditation. He says, I teach meditation, but I'm not interested in meditation. I'm interested in enlightenment. And the reason is that the purpose of meditation has always been enlightenment.
What advice do you have for listeners out there who are struggling to meditate?
Oh, that's a big topic because many things are involved. One is just good teaching and having a teacher you can go back to who will help you get back to doing something that feels effortless. Now, if you're supposed to be making an effort, that may not be the right meditation for you because self-esteem gets involved. Dalai Lama had a therapist talking to him, and he talked about the low self-esteem of all of her clients. And he said, self-esteem? Low self-esteem? He'd never heard of such an idea. Apparently, it's just not something Tibetans feel much of, probably because they're in less of an individualistic culture, so they don't compare themselves so much. Mm-hmm. But we compare ourselves all the time. Am I meditating right? Am I meditating as well as the next person? I don't think I am. I don't think I'm good enough. I'm going to stop. I mean, if it makes you feel bad, you're not going to do it for very long. And so a teacher who's very encouraging is helpful. TM teachers are all trained the same way, which can be frustrating because they'll say pretty much the same thing, but their focus is always on effortless. You don't want to make any effort. So you start the mantra and then you have some thoughts. And then, you're supposed to then go back to the mantra, but you don't feel as settled the next time. So you try to make yourself feel settled, but it just doesn't work that way.
Right.
We release some stress, some thoughts, some stuff that muddies our mind, and we may start into a meditation, have a good experience. The rest of it is nothing but thoughts. And when we're done, we feel, well, that was a bad meditation. No, it was a good meditation. It was what you needed at that time. So I say that on meditation, there's a range from 0 to 10, saying 10 is the best. And you're aiming for lots of 10s. But if you can bring your mind from there to a little quieter, that may be a bigger accomplishment than one where you're maybe on a retreat or nothing's been going on and you're perfectly peaceful. They're both meditating. They're both doing the job that needs to be done. And that's where it helps to have a teacher or someone who can encourage you that you're still on the path, even if you go through months of what seems like, quote, bad meditation, not meditating correctly. So we do need to know what correct is.
There's so many apps and YouTube videos you could watch on meditation, but do you really advise that people get a teacher, like in person?
Yes. You need a human person. Okay. When you start to have rough places, I've had people write to me saying, meditation is hell for me. I tell them meditation should not be hell, but you need to see a good teacher who will help you figure out what to do. Sometimes what people need is simply to go in a little bit for a few minutes and come out, because just that much gets them all riled up. And that being riled up is the purification process. We're getting rid of stress. We're getting rid of the junk in ourselves. And some people would say you're getting rid of the junk in the universe. But if you keep at it, you gradually get more settled. My husband, when he started meditating, couldn't meditate for more than 5 minutes because he was just too restless. And his mother, who was a very anxious type, we had to let her stop meditating because she came to us crying. She said, I'm afraid you're not going to love me because I can't do this. Right. And we said, just stop. We love you. And we could see that this was just going to be hard for her. And although we were her meditation teachers in a sense, probably it's not always good to have someone in your family trying to help you. You need someone that you respect as a bona fide teacher in some way.
And how do you advise finding a meditation teacher? Because I find that can be confusing to find a person.
It is confusing. If you do TM, it's simple. You just go to a TM center and learn from the TM teacher, and they're pretty much almost robots. I mean, they've been taught so thoroughly what to do with each kind of experience. And what they're least good at is the whole subject of enlightenment, because they may not be enlightened themselves. But they certainly can get you on the right path. If you don't want to do TM, then there are lots of mindfulness teachers out there. The Insight Meditation Group, which is on the East Coast, teaches a lot of meditation. They start with mindfulness, but then they go on to Vipassana, which is various practices. It brings us to that separation between state enlivening and practice makes perfect. Buddha gave people meditations, a lot of them. We don't know, but it seems like there's about 40 meditations he had people do. And they'd be meditating on impermanence or on the four hindrances being anger, attachment, ignorance. You'd meditate, you'd get into that settled mindful state, and then you would think about the fact you're mortal, or you would think about the way that things are impermanent and always changing. And thinking about these things enough would, at least theoretically, get you to enlightenment. If you go to a Plum Village retreat, they're very into activism. So into community and community service, which is a whole nother thing. But I think Buddha needed to find something for people to do while they were waiting to get enlightened. So compassion, meditation, being selfless in various ways is good. All of the religions, all of the spiritual teaching schools encourage you to be selfless. So another thing that I haven't said so much about enlightenment is that when you're enlightened, the small self, the ego, just is not very important. Mm-hmm. It's overshadowed by this unboundedness. So yeah, you still have desires and preferences, but they're less important, maybe except in certain places where we have complexes, but those we hopefully realize.
Now I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Unboundedness and these words like equanimity.
Yes.
Can you explain to our listeners who are new to this, what do they mean?
Even though you can hear my voice, behind my voice, there is a kind of presence or a silence. It's the whole space around you that goes on to the edges of your existence. It's unbounded. And it's unbounded because it has no qualities to it except for awareness itself. And the only thing that we all have from birth to death is awareness, because everything else changes. Our state of consciousness changes. We wake up, we get sleepy, we get upset, we drink coffee. But our awareness of our consciousness and our awareness of what's going on around us, that is always there, and that does not change. Letting that experience of awareness become more and more present, more and more dominant until you can't miss it. So you're looking at me, you're hearing my voice, but at the same time, perhaps you can feel a pure alertness that is behind everything, and it's you, but it's not the small self. The small self is attached to this body, this mind. We think Elaine Aron is the center of the universe, kind of
exactly
center of my universe, but actually Elaine Aron is just a product of something that happened and is living and changing and going to die. The part of me that is not Elaine Aron, however, is there as something unbounded that is focused in, become focused on me, and comes to a focus, and yet it remains unbounded. And that's a lot like quantum field theory, that we have particles, and yet they're always waves that are fluctuating, and yet weirdness is even that it requires an observer, an individual, to bring that into awareness, and yet the particles are always there in potentiality. And that field of potentiality, physicists just hate it when spiritual people start turning quantum field theory into something spiritual, but it's pretty hard to ignore, and many physicists have, because of the weirdness of it. This idea that nothing exists without consciousness pulling it into a point, that all particles can be bound up non-locally, so that a particle here and at the other end of the universe know each other, know what each other's doing. I mean, it's spooky action at a distance, they call it, but there is something there to become aware of. There's something there, and that is actually who you really are deep down.
Well, can you explain, from your perspective, who are we really, and why is awareness so important?
Well, without awareness, we wouldn't be anything, would we? We can't be anything without awareness. So who are we really? You have awareness and I have awareness. Somehow we're able to pull it into ourselves, and yet it's always out there. So we are little bumps, like little particles in the field. We're important, I think, because we do affect other people. And our enlightenment, I believe, affects other people. Maybe not by just going out and doing good works, but maybe at some subtler level of this equanimity spreading. The question of how enlightened people change the world is a big one. Spiritual teachers say, oh, definitely they do. But as a scientist, I want to see exactly how that happens. There is some research on groups of people meditating together affecting larger numbers of people around them.
What is equanimity?
To me, it is several things. Emotionally, it's calm. And calm is so useful. It's a wonderful story I tell in there about Krishna and Arjuna and how Krishna is teaching Arjuna, who has to shoot the first arrow that is going to start a huge civil war that's going to kill a lot of people on both sides. And he doesn't want to do it. He's just collapsing from grief about having to do this, but he has to because there's something very bad happening. So Krishna gives him this advice: established in being, perform action. So first you get yourself established in this quiet, and then you go out and perform action. You do what you have to do, but with this equanimity. And the equanimity can be thought of as emotional, also can be thought of as the brain, a different way that the brain functions. In my book, I describe a lot of this research about coherence in the brain and how it's common for people who've been meditating a long time, and it changes how they do certain tasks in an interesting way. It's present more in skilled athletes and skilled musicians and skilled managers. It's something that happens in the brain. So we talk about emotionally or in the brain, or we can talk about it in this more metaphysical sense of being in touch with something unbounded, and then talk about the self, the small self, being identified with that unboundedness and not with this particular body-mind. So this body-mind is going to die, and I get told that it's going to die soon, or if the person that this body-mind loves dearly is going to die, and I'm told that's going to happen or has already happened. How do I get into some kind of equanimity? Well, it's because some part of me does know now that I am part of that unboundedness. The more that deepens, the more profound the inner peace.
When you got diagnosed with breast cancer, were you really confronted with some of your spiritual beliefs? How did it change them or change you?
No, I think it was more that, oh, look at me, I can fly. It was sort of like, oh, I knew I had that equanimity, but it had not been tested in that particular way. And of course, if they had told me that it had metastasized and I had 3 months to live, it might have taken me a few hours to get back to equanimity, But yeah, the equanimity was there, and it was an opportunity to see just how much it was there.
And it sounds like you have equanimity about death, too. Like you feel at peace about dying one day.
I really personally believe that my death will take care of itself. I don't give it any thought. I get that message. I also have conversations with something I call God, and God has told me not to worry about my death, so I don't.
Can you tell us about the conversation with God? Because I believe in an inner voice inside each of us and thoughts, and it's like in our deepest
I don't
presence.
trust this inner voice as being God, not really, but I do think we all have an inner voice that is the same thing that gives us our dreams, which is always the rest of the story, the full picture. I mean, I love dreams, and dreams are so interesting. I always tell people, be careful telling me your dream, because in 10 minutes, I'll know everything about you. These dreams are so revealing. So I think of this inner voice as just the rest of the story, and I consult with it. I do trust that don't worry about your death, because I think it makes sense. I mean, this worrying about death is just not helpful, and yet it's important to know you're going to die. It's one of my favorite TV shows is The Good Place. Yeah, the first couple episodes are not very good. The spoiler alert, the good place they're in is hell, and they don't know it. They're being tortured. And it all unfolds wonderfully. But at the end, they really do go to live in the good place, heaven. But there's a problem with heaven. When they get there, they realize everybody is dissatisfied, because the one thing they never do if they're in heaven is die. So they create this threshold that whenever you're done with being in heaven, you can go through that threshold and you're gone. I like the idea that maybe humans do need death as a piece of something like that little bit of sand in the oyster to build the pearl around. We fuss. We want to live our life well because we know we won't live forever. We won't have a human body forever. So if we need a human body to get enlightened, we'd better get on the stick, right? We better get going.
That's a good way to look at death. I'm really struggling with my death because I turned 40 this year.
Oh my goodness, honey. I'm 81. And I'll tell you, 80 is not the new 60. 80 is the new 80.
Well, so you mentioned God. How did you define God?
Well, in my book, I told people to think of God as their belief in God as being somewhere on a sliding scale. At one end, no belief, the other end, total belief, and that you slip along it according to what's going on in your life or what you've been taught. And it's okay. It's okay, whatever you believe. I mean, because after all, people love Buddhism partly because Buddha said, no God, forget God. That is a waste. And you won't get to Nirvana until you let go of everything, including your attachment to God. So modern Buddhism fits well for atheists because they don't have to have an opinion about God. Buddha said, forget it. So they forget it.
Well, how do you personally define God?
My husband really believes in God. And I ask his opinion. He says, look, there was the plague, there was nuclear weapons and a pandemic and climate change, and we're all still here. Maybe somebody doesn't want us gone. We keep still being here. We all die. Death is not the reason to not believe in God. It's so much a personal matter. And Meister Eckhart was good. He talked about there's a personal God, the God of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, the God the Father. And then there's the Godhead, the thing beyond that. And if people want a personal God, someone they can pray to, as long as they're okay with the response, boy, there's lots of research that shows that prayer works sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So there's something there. I don't feel the need to figure it out for other people and for myself. I think I'm headed, as I evolve, as long as I'm in this body, as long as I keep feeling the nearness of that unboundedness, I think ultimate God is somewhere in it. Maybe I haven't quite found that ultimate God, that pure divinity that is behind creation.
I think of God as the light inside each of us, the divinity inside each of us.
Yes, I think that's a perfectly lovely definition of it, the light inside each of us. But if you want to believe that light is guiding you somewhere, then in a sense, that's God working inside you.
I was thinking of enlightenment like connecting to the light inside you, becoming aware of it and honoring it. I think that that's very important in life.
Yes. It's like the light inside you is lit up. It just gets brighter and brighter, and then it takes over your thinking. It takes over your feeling that you do the right thing all the time because you've gotten that biggest possible light. I think that's a way to think about that light inside.
Yeah.
That light can get stronger.
It can get stronger and grow, and the more you trust and believe in it, which I feel is a spiritual journey. And in your book, you talk about waking up and cleaning up.
Yes.
Which is the process of removing all the crud around the light.
Exactly. And both are important. And we see what happens when people wake up without cleaning up. They get into all kinds of trouble because they still have complexes. They still have things like sexuality and greed and just take over. And greed can be not for your individual self, but wanting things because you were raised to want things, and usually that's wanting things for your whole group or for your family or whatever. But I like Ken Wilber's ideas about this, that waking up is something that the East has been working on for a long time. Waking up is something that only in the West we've only been working on for about 100 years. You know, really, Freud and Jung and Carl Rogers and these various people that thought about how to help people deal with their complexes. Of course, then insurance came along. We had to find quicker ways to do it, cognitive behavioral therapy. Right. And we know that the therapeutic relationship is still key to the whole thing. And that goes deep inside to that mother-child bond, whether it's father or whatever, that parent-child need for security and growth and teaching from someone, and that adult companionship, that magical chemistry of knowledge, along with transference. It's so interesting to watch Freud figure out the knowledge and just get so bogged down in the transference. It took a while for people to realize just what the boundaries had to be in order to mobilize that energy in the therapeutic relationship without letting it destroy the individual's path. How to keep the individual's inner light. A Jungian analyst who talked about someone would come to him and they would just project onto him that he was wonderful and they were nothing. And he would wait, he said, he'd hold their gold. And you might say he'd hold their inner light and let them think that he had the inner light. And then at some point, he could give it back to them, say, it's actually your inner light. It's actually you that guides your process, not me.
That's beautiful.
But if you don't have faith in that inner light, you need to get that, in a sense, from the relationship. The therapeutic relationship it's an individual issue, isn't it? It's so hard to get it right, particularly around attachment issues. Interesting, this guy, Dan Brown, who's such an expert in Tibetan meditation, is also an expert in attachment. He wrote papers on it. He actually has a little YouTube about creating a secure attachment for yourself. But attachment is a fundamental human issue, our attachment to each other and its health or its unhealthiness. But you need that inner light because you have to know who to attach to, when to let go.
Well, do you feel like the inner light is something that one could securely attach to and then thus feel more equanimity in life? Like meditation is the process of developing a relationship with the inner light, and that creates a secure attachment?
Well, that's a big issue. We'd like everyone to end up independent, not needing anybody. The biggest problem, I think, in therapy is as you develop the transference with a person who's at an insecure attachment, they become attached to you. And then always in the background is the one fact that you're not going to be there always. So you're creating insecurity even while you're trying to cure insecurity. I think it's more likely that they're going to have a combination of that, insecurity with certain relationships and the ability to move from one relationship to another when it's necessary, but to have a good relationship in your life that's not a therapist that you can count on and live with and trust, and I think, and the inner light. And the two together is probably because we're social beings. We can't get rid of our social needs, but we're also definitely have to grow up to the point where that inner light is, we know it and we trust it and we lean on it.
Do you think Buddhism was an early study of psychology? Like, where do you see the delineations between spirituality and psychology? Are they really as separate as they seem to be in modern day?
Well, if you want someone to reach nirvana, you'd better know a lot about human psychology. So in a sense, Buddha was an expert in psychology, but only in certain aspects of psychology, the part that would help him lead people to nirvana, which you could say is everything. And many people try to use Buddhism as a sort of substitute for psychology, and that Buddhism is vast, it's just vast. And so almost anything is there. Nowadays, some Buddhists are experimenting with psychedelics, so that's not exactly what you would expect. Buddhists give relationship advice. So I think some people really just find Buddhism very appealing. And so they can use it as a kind of therapy. It doesn't go down with the insurance companies.
Right. What are your thoughts on psychedelics?
Oh, I tried LSD and I tried grass, and it was fun. And if I didn't think it would do me any harm, I'd probably do some more of it. But I really believe the brain, you shouldn't mess with it in that way. And the people will tell you that it's not a way to get enlightened. It's a way to have spectacular experiences. So if you like spectacular experiences, some people find them spectacular, other people find them disappointing. I would not recommend people consider that as a permanent path to equanimity or a calm, coherent brain.
There's been all this research on psychedelic-assisted therapy or using psychedelic medicines to help with depression, anxiety, and trauma. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, sure. I mean, if I'm really depressed it's like any other kind of medication. It has side effects. I think all brains are really different. Some brains maybe aren't going to get enlightened. They've been too damaged by various things, including possibly genetics. We don't know. So if a person benefits from psychedelics, usually it's because it opens a door and they see the world differently. And then they go on living with a new perspective, which is great. It's always good to get a new perspective. But if you keep doing it, then it becomes more like a form of entertainment. And that's okay, except it's going to be hard on the brain eventually.
I guess it becomes an attachment.
Yes, Buddha would definitely say it's an attachment.
It becomes an attachment, which in itself is a problem, because if you're attached to things, then you're blocked from freedom, nirvana.
Right.
Yeah. And you think that over time, it actually taxes the brain. There's definitely some sort of long-term effects on the brain with repeated.
Well, I've heard interviewed somebody who's had, done like 200 or 300 trips, and he said, definitely it hasn't been the greatest thing for my brain. His wife attests to it. We haven't been able to do enough research on psychedelics to know the long-term effects. And these may vary for people, and of course varies with the psychedelics. But even the Native Americans who used psychedelics a lot used them to have a particular experience and an insight into the world. They didn't just use it like going to the movies,
What is wonderful about getting your perspective on and take on things is how you value science as well as spirituality, and how deeply you value the two. And
yes. I don't know why you wouldn't.
You've mentioned the brain a number of times. How did you become interested in the brain?
I've been interested in the brain research since the people, their brains work differently. And then I've been interested in the research on people who are enlightened or think of themselves as enlightened and how their brains are different. I guess it's a way of anchoring something. Then I guess it's real, which is a terrible way to talk, but it does work for me. Then I have more
it's grounded
faith in it. Yes. I also know that science is often mistaken. Science is never done. And, we thought, there's 20% of people are highly sensitive. Well, the research now makes it seem like maybe it's more like 30%. I had to go and change everything I wrote. Well, people said, how come you changed that? Well, because that's science, that's learning, that's growth. The trouble we got into with the pandemic, people were trying to learn more about COVID and how to treat it. I was wiping down all my groceries with alcoholic wipes for months, and then somebody said, don't do that anymore. It doesn't work. It was very hard to stop wiping down my groceries, I'll tell you. Yeah. I was convinced I was saving our lives. Right. And then people got mad at science because it had fooled them. It didn't. It was just working. It was just doing its job, which is just doing research and checking things out.
Do you find that highly sensitive people are also more spiritual?
Well, that's the piece of research I deliberately refuse to do.
Why is that?
Because I don't want then people to feel, well, I'm not highly sensitive, so I'll never get enlightened, or I can't ever be spiritual. Or just as bad, all those HSPs are all spiritual. A lot of them are not spiritual. I didn't want it to become a thing that they possessed more than other people, because, somebody else is going to do that research, I know. And in fact, they'll find that highly sensitive people, on the average, are more spiritual. I'm not going to do it. We just revised the HSP scale, and I actually did want, one of the items is, do you tend to have philosophical thoughts? And I wanted it to be philosophical or spiritual, because I knew that was right. And if or was there, then it wouldn't be a problem. But they took spiritual off because a lot of the people working on it were Europeans. Oh. And in Europe right now, spirituality really has a bad name because religion has a bad name. It's kind of weird.
Yeah.
In the U.S., it's like people are crazy spiritual. And in Europe, they're crazy not spiritual.
Right. And then do you see, like, right now in spirituality that things are very not scientific? Like people talk about crystals, or they talk about...
Right. Well, one definition of spirituality, one definition is spirit versus matter. And if you take that, then it's spiritual versus materialism. Materialism is the belief in facts that we can see or test. We can see the results somewhere on a microscope or in some kind of laboratory experiment. And things that we can't see then are spiritual. I don't like that definition, but many people adhere to that. And it has its justifications in that many spiritual people do believe in things that science could never explain easily. So it is a corner that people can go to. I can be in the spiritual corner and I can just say, forget science. And then the people in the science corner can say, you go over in that spiritual corner, you don't know anything, or you're not interested in the facts. The thing I like to say is that human beings love to divide up.
Yeah.
If you have social psychology, you have people go stand in a circle and you go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and have the ones go to one end of the room, the twos go to the other, and then you ask them qualities of the ones and the twos. Everybody thinks their group is better.
Right.
And so as soon as we identify with a group, and that's why I've been harassing HSPs, don't think of yourself as better. You're going to be pulled from thinking yourself as there's something wrong with you, which a lot of them say, oh, I thought there was something wrong with me, and now I know I'm highly sensitive. Well, don't switch that and say, now I know there's something wonderful about me. I have superpowers because I'm highly sensitive. No, you're just different. But to have people think of themselves as different, but not better or worse, is almost impossible for humans to do.
That's right.
If I say red, blue, dog, cat, salt, pepper, right, left, up, down, London, Paris, you'll have a favorite of every one of them.
Right.
And something about the mind that wants to choose a favorite.
What is your opinion on consciousness? What do you think it is?
Consciousness in science is called the hard problem. I can say consciousness is what fluctuates when we're asleep, when we're awake, when we're hungry. It's an aspect of the brain. And that seems pretty obvious. We'll get into, well, what really is consciousness and where does it come from? And that gets into spiritual questions about whether it's in the universe or whether it's in the brain. And what about near-death experiences? Is consciousness entirely a product of the brain, or is it the brain more like a receptor for something from outside? So consciousness would be like a receiver and a broadcaster, maybe. There's evidence for all of those views, but I guess I like the fact that it can't be defined because it does leave something, to me, very unbounded. Buddhists say consciousness is also just impermanent. And it's true, because when we die, our consciousness is gone.
I think the problem is when everything is defined by science, and if you can't measure it, then it doesn't exist. I feel that there's a problem with that perspective.
Well, sure, and scientists know it's a problem too, because there are a lot of things that they don't know what dark matter is and dark energy. They can't measure it, but they know it's there.
When people just take the perspective of science as their spirituality, I think that's been a really big problem, because if the only thing in life is what you see, then you're not going to have a sense of greater meaning or connection to other things, like the mysteries of the Big Bang or consciousness itself. There needs to be room for mystery. And so that's why I'm really fascinated by the intersection of where science and spirituality can make sense together.
If the intersection bothers you, if it's nudging at you, if you're feeling like you're being forced into one camp or the other, then I think it's a very good thing to explore.
So if someone is interested in beginning this journey, what advice do you have? Where should they start?
I think I would have a person just sit quietly and close their eyes and see what happens. See if they notice quietness. See if they notice turmoil. If you notice a lot of turmoil, you might head straight for therapy. If you notice a lot of quiet, you might head straight for a meditation teacher. But you're going to have both eventually. You're going to have quiet sometimes and turmoil sometimes. So
I recommend to them reading your book, because it does provide a really nice guidance, because it feels like there's someone on the journey, on the path with you.
I wanted it to be like a sanctuary where I could maybe step outside of their worries about science versus spirituality and just, stop worrying about whether they should choose Buddhism or choose TM, or whether just stop worrying and relax with me, because, okay, I am 81. I've seen a lot.
There definitely was that feeling like the reader could relax, and the feeling of trust because you value science. And so this book really integrates the two. So I really want to thank you for that. Well, how can our listeners support your work or find you on the internet?
Well, I have a website for the high sensitivity work. It's hsperson.com.
Well, thank you for all your work, and thank you for joining us today. It's been a real honor.
Thank you for inviting me, and thank you for your incredibly good questions. Very good.
If you'd like to support the show,
the most helpful way would be to subscribe on Apple Podcasts or YouTube or Spotify. It would just be awesome if you could also share an episode that you found helpful with a friend. That would help spread the word about Inner Calling and helps us make the show better for you each time. Thank you for joining me today. I hope you have a beautiful day.